Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR, and we have our basketball episode. If you know how we're doing this, we're doing one basketball episode a week, and we're going to break down some games from the Big Ten. We try to do the big games right now. Once we get deeper into the season and football season's over, we'll probably do more of some of the littler games and stuff like that. But for now, we're doing the big games, and there have been some big games this past week that we're going to get into. We're also going to get into a new article that dropped by Ross Dellinger today about how the NCAA could be dead within 5 years. So we're going to talk about that, what that means, get the guys' thoughts. But before we do that, I do want to introduce our guests. First one, I'm going to have him introduce himself and tell you where you can find his podcast is Russ. Let us know about yourself and where people can find you.
Yes, I'm Russ. I'm with Boiler Express podcast. We do all things Purdue sports, but with Big Banter, we take care of Purdue football and Purdue basketball. You can find us on all the socials, anywhere you listen to podcasts. Just look up Boiler Express. You'll find us there. We're even doing some stuff on Instagram, doing little short videos and stuff like that. So, yeah, we do everything Purdue, but with Big Banter, we specialize in basketball and football. So come check it out.
Excellent. Yeah, go check out Russ. And then we have making his first appearance on the Big Ten Huddle, one of our Javamen, Nick. Nick, tell people about you and where they can find you at.
Awesome. Thank you, JR. Hey, everyone. This is Java Nick, part of the Javamen Fighting Illini basketball podcast. So we are on all of where you get your local podcasts. Typically try to release an episode once a week, Wednesday or Thursday night, recapping the previous week. We do a couple of what we like to say go-to segments. We love drinking Java. We love drinking rum. We love doing the pirate theme thing. You'll see if you check us out on Twitter. We're always posting videos or one of our videos and photos. You'll see one of our favorites, Coach Underwood, with the pirate eye patch. So come check us out. We love talking Illini ball. And thanks for having me, JR.
Yeah, hey, glad to have you here, man. We got a comment already. Dylan says, Russ, you are so handsome.
Too kind, too kind.
Normally he comes in and tells Eric he's handsome, so you're getting the special
I've never met the guy
today.
before, but he sounds like a really smart guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure he's got great taste. All right, guys, let's get into our before we do that, please do like and subscribe on YouTube if you're watching there. If you're listening on podcast, please do give us a rating. We appreciate that. Follow us there and get an episode every single time it releases. And do be aware we are brought to you by Big Banter Sports, bigbantersports.com for all your Big Ten media needs, Big Ten football and basketball. You can find a show for every team, and you can find this channel or you can find this podcast over there as well. All right, got that stuff out of the way. Let's get over to the Ross Dellinger article that was released. So Ross Dellinger has put out an article saying basically the NCAA will be dead within 5 years, and we will start seeing this great split that people have been talking about from some of like the power conferences and some of those like lower level, I want to say group of five. I know it's not really group of five in basketball, but you get the gist of what I'm saying when I say that. So it's a bit of an interesting situation, and there's a lot of content to cover in this article. I don't know if I want to just like read it to you and it would be boring, but basically the gist of it is that the Maryland athletic director, Damon Evans, came and had a meeting with some other athletic directors and some other important people in the Maryland community and some more even further than that, and said basically that the power conferences will have revenue sharing for players within the next 5 years. He said, and I quote, "I do believe 5 years from now that we will be at a point where we are sharing revenue with student athletes." He went on later to say, "It would not surprise me to see some sort of different type of governance structure in place that separates the P5 from the current structure." So obviously he's kind of talking about football there, but later on in the article, he goes on to talk about all revenue producing sports, which would obviously include basketball. So obviously, since it's a basketball podcast, we're going to kind of focus more on basketball, but I'm sure both these guys will also touch on football as well. Like I said, I don't want to go through the entire article and read everything, but that's basically the gist of it. There's some more information about how like the March Madness could turn into like its own independent thing, kind of how like the college football playoffs are their own thing, separate from the NCAA. So we might see something like that. But Russ, I want to go to you first. What were kind of your thoughts when you first read and heard about this information?
Yeah, so it's something that I think the writing has been on the wall for a while now. That even with this recent stuff with Michigan, that's part of the question with the NCAA is how much are they going to do, because they know that their days are kind of numbered. They know that there's these rumors with the power conferences becoming super conferences. How long will the NCAA really still be necessary? Because they've been outdated for a while, right? With the playoff system, with the revenue share, with the NIL stuff. Even high schools have done this, right? Like you have prep schools and high schools that are just about sports that have said, hey, look, we're going to separate ourselves from, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, insert state athletic association. We're going to do our own private high school, play these other private high schools, and if they premier product of guys that are going to go to the NBA or go to D1, and so it's only natural that the NCAA is eventually going to move to that. And the NIL is a great system. It's a great idea, but without revenue sharing, it wasn't going to last anyways, because donors aren't going to keep opening up their pocketbooks for guys that might not pan out, for guys that might end up transferred after a year. And so revenue sharing is something that needs to happen, because it rewards the guys that are actually in the building at the time, that are doing the work in that specific season. And it's more of actual, salary based, pay for play kind of based thing, but within certain parameters that we've always needed.
Yeah, and they went on to say too that like a lot of athletic directors and stuff feel like the NIL system is already broken. There's already flaws in it. There's already things, and I think anybody who watches college athletics knows that it's not fully developed. And so what they're actually banking on is that this bill or whatever that's currently at Congress will make it so that the schools can actually bargain, or the conferences can actually bargain with the players to give them money. But based on this bill by Congress, there would be an exemption that would no longer deem them to be employees, which is really strange. I don't know exactly how that works. Nick, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking of, JR, when you were talking about this, and I don't know if you guys recently saw this, but the state of Missouri, and this kind of hits home for University of Illinois. So the state of Missouri passed a law that basically allows any state school in Missouri to pay high school players NIL money if they commit to a state school. So to me, I mean, going back to the original point, right, JR, like we're in uncharted waters, using the Javamen reference there. I mean, think about it. We're going to see an evolution, I think, in the next 5 years. I know that's what the article is getting at. But I'm not sure anyone really knows where this is going to land. I'm frankly terrified of Missouri now getting the upper hand. If you think about some of the top recruiting cities in the state of Missouri, that's battleground between University of Illinois and University of Missouri. Mm-hmm. And if you're a high school kid and you're getting some money offered to you as a junior in high school, I mean, that's a no-brainer to go to Missouri over U of I. So it almost sets off this arms race in a way where in order for University of Illinois or state schools to keep up, you almost have to pass this law just to get kids to stay local, get kids to commit to your school over the other. So I don't know. We'll see. It's interesting. I don't know. We talked about it with the transfer portal. It's like I said, it's uncharted waters. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up that Missouri thing, because it's important to realize that like the NCAA for a long, long time, what they have tried to do is they have tried to make everything equal and fair for all these schools,
right,
which we know is just not possible, right?
Yeah.
I mean, going back to what Russ said about Michigan, I know this is football, but it does pertain here. This whole like no in-person scouting rule, that was all done from the beginning, not because it's like immoral or wrong. It was done because Group of 5 schools wouldn't have the finances to be able to send people out to scout at different games, because they would still have to buy tickets, they would still have to travel, do all of those things. So the NCAA has always been about, what is fair. And I think at this point now, it's like you've got the Big Ten, who just got $1 billion, sports contract or TV contract, and you've got the MAC, who is I don't even know what their TV contract makes, but it doesn't make anywhere near that. And so it's like, how is any of this fair? And it's kind of what is leading to this great, like we said, split or whatever we want to call it, of why things like this are happening. So Nick, looks like you got a Javamen watching in there. Scott
there we go.
Shapiro. So
speaking of Michigan too, JR,
yeah, go ahead, Russ.
Your hoodie looks like very close
No,
to that.
okay. I was just.
that
It's Kent
I
State.
mean,
Yeah, you
it's
gotta be careful there.
I
Jay.
yeah, that
know.
color scheme is not the color scheme you should be wearing this week as an
I
Ohio
know.
State fan. I'm just
My
The
sister
Java-
goes to Kent State, so I have an excuse.
There we go. The Javamen are adopting OSU for the weekend. We are very much on the Michigan hater bandwagon, and it's hard not to be the way that they've acted in this whole scandal. So I'll just throw that out there for the group.
You guys are gonna ruin the Ohio against the world stuff.
Is that your guys' thing? That's your guys' thing?
No, that was the
world?
thing like in 2014, and
Yeah.
then Ryan Day kind of brought it back because he said it at the end of the Notre Dame game when he was yelling at Lou Holtz. But
You guys see Harbaugh today when they
uh,
asked him about what his respect level is for Day?
oh yeah, I posted about it. I said it's and I got a lot of Michigan fans mad when I posted about it.
JR, you're on point with the Twitter game, by the way.
Hey,
I have to
thanks.
compliment you.
I appreciate that.
agreed.
So another thing I wanted to ask you guys about with this, and Russ, we'll go to you with this first, and Nick, then we'll get your comments. So this new structure they're talking about is how schools can utilize the money, because schools are gonna get paid, but they don't want to just give these schools all this money and then them use it in a way that I guess the NCAA or whoever is in charge without the NCAA doesn't see it fit. And so what they're actually talking about in this one of these models is that they would actually put a cap on coaches' salaries and say, coaches can no longer make more than XYZ amount, and that any money earned by like postseason play and stuff like that would have to be spent on education and player health and well-being. So what they describe as that is like mental health stuff, which I think is fantastic. Every school should be operating with those things, and then also like the trainers room, more trainers, stuff like that. So Russ, what are your thoughts on the NCAA or whoever it is, like basically telling schools what they can do with the money?
Well, this is part of the Pandora's box that NIL kind of opened up, that people warned about, that said you're not going to be able to put the brakes on this. You're not going to be able to keep it under control and under wraps. Like, it's going to get out of control. It's going to get abused, and you're going to have to micromanage the crap out of it eventually. And the other part that could, in this article kind of alluded to it, that could really throw a wrench into things is if the Power 5 conferences, they break apart, that's going to destroy some of the integrity and some of the things that we love about college sports, right?
Right.
Like, what happens to the March Madness, right? We're going into basketball season. What happens to that? Now is it tainted now? Like, now if a team wins the national championship, is it like, oh, well, it's not really a national championship because
Right.
now it's only like a pool of 70, 80, 90 schools instead of the 300 plus, But yeah, I mean, it was almost hard to read the way that they get into like, well, this money has to be regulated this way and this, but it's I go back to it's what people, traditionalist old school guys like me that were like, hey, I don't know, I don't like NIL. It's gonna open this big box of worms, and or a can of worms. That's what's happened.
Right.
So,
What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Russ. I think the NCAA is in total scramble mode, right? I don't think they know what's best because we've never been here before. There's not a playbook, so it's just hard to see what happens from here. I'm very much like you, Russ, with the NIL. I love the fact that players are getting compensated. I think they should. I don't know how you control that. It's just the reality of the situation, but all these things that it's created now is just, it's just tough when you're watching your team and you recruit a 5-star for the first time and your coach benches him because he's not playing defense, and then you immediately know that he's going to transfer the next year, right? Just he's going to go to the next school that offers him playing time and more money. So it's just, it's hard to be all the things that we love about college basketball, the loyalty. You love seeing these kids stay at the school for 4 or 5 years and kind of growing with them and watching them develop. You lose a lot of that. So
that's the Purdue way. We grow our guys,
exactly.
we keep them. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, the last, I'm a Buckeye fan, so the last player I can remember that really did that and will be remembered probably as the last guy who really did that was Aaron Kraft. And I'm sure both of you guys have somebody in your program that did that. And when Aaron Kraft did it, it wasn't like it was sad because we knew it was going to be one of the last ones, because we didn't know it was going to be one of the last ones.
Yeah.
But like you were saying, Nick, I'm looking at things now and it's like, like when Chris Holtman started benching Bryce Sensabaugh last year in some of those games, I was like, okay, well, he's either going to go to the NBA or transfer, one of the two. And I really liked Bryce Sensabaugh. I thought he was a good player. And I didn't know what was going to happen this season, too. I didn't know if Felix Okpara was going to come back with Zed Key coming back. I didn't know if Bruce Thornton and Ronnie Gale, those kind of guys. And so it is really, really interesting to see, because I agree I don't like NIL, but I think it's right for the players to be able to make money.
Yeah.
So. One last thing I want to say, too, is I know we talked about, Pandora's box is opened. Oh, no, what's around the corner? Is the NCAA dead? As a fan, don't panic. It's going to be fine. Mm-hmm. There's too much money involved in college sports for them to not figure this thing out and not get a good product on the court or on the field. And even if you're worried about your particular school, right? Like Purdue fans, they kind of panicked a little bit when NIL came out, right? Because it's like, oh man, Painter, especially with basketball, we've relied on these guys that stay for 4 or 5 years, but now if they can transfer and go make money more somewhere else, what's going to happen? The sky's falling. Well, what has Purdue done the last 2 years? Like take out the tournament, obviously, but we were number one in the country for the first time in school history 2 years in a row. So it's not going to completely change, the landscape of college sports. It is and it isn't. You're still going to see a good product. You're still going to see parity. You're still going to see. It's not just going to be 1 or 2 super teams. Like it's still going to be a good product. And if you're watching this, you're a Big Ten fan, so you're definitely fine because the Big Ten is one of the super conferences. So we're good. We're good.
Adapt or die, right, Russ? You got to adapt.
Exactly.
That's the only way.
And there's plenty of rumors out there about some schools won't be able to afford it. And oh my gosh, that Purdue fan is on the screen right now with the gold top hat thing. Sorry, but. That's the whole thing, right? That people are talking about is they're saying, who's going to not have the money to be able to do these things? I don't think it's anybody in the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten is going to have plenty of money to do all these things. I read an article today that was talking about it's going to be the Big 12. It's going to be some of the lower level ACC teams that are going to struggle more with this, and possibly they might be out of the power conferences just because they're not able to afford it. So we'll see what happens there, but. All right, you guys got any more thoughts on this before we move on?
Ready to move on.
All right. Let's move on to Purdue. So we have Purdue playing right now. Purdue is in a battle with Tennessee. It is 40-33 as we speak. But
Who's winning?
Purdue.
JB. Oh, yeah. All right.
Pretty good start to the second half, though.
They were down at halftime, but
how many minutes left?
17.
All right, good. Someone's got to represent the Big Ten, right? Purdue's about the only team that's doing it right now.
Hey, don't sleep on Penn State and Nebraska now. They're undefeated too. So
we know well enough about Penn State after they swept us in 3 games last year. So
hey.
Purdue did play last night and they beat Gonzaga 73-63. There's some people talking about they're really down on Gonzaga. I hate when this happens. I feel like, Gonzaga is the number 11 in the country. All right, you can't watch Purdue beat them and then say well, are they really, even a top 20 team? It's no, they beat them. All right, Purdue's one of the best teams in the country. Gonzaga lost. It's just the matter of fact of the way things are. Russ, we'll go to you first. What'd you think of this game? And then if you have any comments on the Tennessee Purdue game right now.
Yeah, man, I was listening to last week's episode, which I encourage you all go back, and if this is your first time listening to the Big Ten Huddle, there's a lot of great stuff out there. They talk about all the teams in the Big Ten, and it's really good stuff as far as everybody's opinion and this, that, and the other. But I was listening to last week's basketball, especially with Brant on there, talking down Xavier after we beat Xavier. Xavier's they're ranked 30th in KenPom, they're a decent team, but this is the time of year, right, where if it's your team losing games or in close games, they're like, oh well. Wright State's actually a lot better than you think they are. But if you don't like the team or if you're mad at Purdue for being the big dog, you're going to talk down, well, Xavier's lost a lot. I don't know how good they are. It's that time of year, right? And,
so Brant was trashing Xavier? Is that
I'm probably exaggerating a little bit there.
He wasn't trashing them, but he was definitely doing what we're talking about, where you see him lose to Purdue and you're like, well, are they really that good?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, my biggest takeaway, though, to get back to last night's game, is we didn't really play that well. Purdue didn't play that well of a game, that good of a game, and we still won it pretty comfortably. Mm-hmm. So that's my biggest takeaway, because Gonzaga, they still are going to be at least probably Sweet 16, maybe even Elite 18. they're still a good ball club. Mark Few puts together a good team every year, and it's just a good kind of feel out game at the beginning of the season here. Obviously, Purdue fans are already afraid of March and what's going to happen down the road, but it's the Maui Invitational this year has been awesome for Purdue because we got the win against Gonzaga, which means now, regardless what happens against Tennessee, we're going to get another game against a top 5 team. And so that's what I'm taking away from yesterday's game, today's game, and whoever we play tomorrow is it's just kind of a measuring stick right now. There's not a lot of teams out there that want to play a lot of top level talent outside their conference, especially if you're in the Big Ten. They don't want to take 4 or 5 losses in Big Ten play. But some of these programs that have built a better, program like Painter has at Purdue, they have that luxury to kind of do that because they know we're still going to be competitive in the Big Ten. We don't have to stack up cupcakes. You look at the stats from last night, and obviously Edie finally kind of got his, and he's shown that he's going to go back for that National Player of the Year, and so it was good to see that. But it's good to see our bench and how deep our bench is and how much they can contribute, because through the first 4 games, our bench is actually shooting better than our starting 5 is percentage-wise. So that's one thing I've taken away from last night and other games of the season as well.
Yeah, did you see the game last night, Nick? You have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean the Purdue, I guess the tournament they're in now, that was reminiscent of what Illinois went through last year. We were in I forget the name of the tournament, but it was in Vegas, where we started the year against UCLA, and then we played Virginia. And Russ, I agree with what you're saying. I think it tells you a lot about your team to start the year. I wasn't surprised at all to see Purdue dominate Gonzaga. I mean, I've seen it for the last 3 years when they play Illinois. Illinois and Purdue always have some awesome battles. Last year, really the last 2 years, Purdue's gotten the better of Illinois. The one thing, and Russ, I was thinking about, I knew I was coming on the pod tonight with a Boilermaker. And, the one thing that we always kind of talked about, the Javamen, when we had Kofi, very similar to Edie, right? It's kind of a cheat code as a coach. And Brad, we'll get into his issues. He's, we don't think he's the best X and O guy. He's a cheat code, so you kind of just, you stroll your way through the season, dominate the Big Ten. But, what happened with Illinois all those years, it happened a little bit with Purdue. What changes in March? I think you play some teams. Edie gets a little exposed on the pick and roll. You bring him outside, and then, what's your view on what changes this March after the last 2 years that you guys saw?
My view personally,
Yeah.
How much time you have?
That's a whole. I'm gonna start turning into the boiler pods.
Yeah. So I mean, if you look into the X's and O's and you look into the box score last year from the Fairleigh Dickinson game, the only thing you really see that stands out is we didn't shoot the ball well.
Yeah.
We went 19% from 3-point land. We hit 5 of 26, and 25 of those 26 were wide open threes. And we're a team that shot 33% on the season. So literally, if we make 3 or 4 more of those, we're not even talking about it, and we're probably on to the Sweet 16 or Elite 8 or further. So it's something that Painter has obviously struggled with. And if you listen to a lot of the coaches shows for Purdue or the post game pressers, he constantly talks about how he's always trying to learn. He's always trying to build his team around its strengths, but he's also always trying to come up with new ways to build his teams going into March, to have it be guard centered or big centered, or are we going to play fast tempo or slower tempo? Like he's definitely struggled with that, and I think it just comes down to that the NCAA tournament is just it's a crapshoot.
Yeah,
that's why we love it, right? It's March Madness. It's a crapshoot. It's not, in my opinion, it's harder to go win the regular season in the Big Ten than it is to win a 3-weekend tournament in March. Because you can have one guy get hot for 3 weekends and you win a tournament, and especially if the tournament falls your way. But in the Big Ten, you can't hide. You can't have 1 or 2 good nights and then take the rest of the season off. Like, you've got to grind every single night. And especially in the Big Ten, when you do that throughout the season and you get to March, you're worn down, and you've got to find a way to play a completely different ball game against completely new opponents. Like, it's tough.
Yeah.
The Big Ten is notorious for beating up each other, right? Yeah,
that's
what were you
probably
gonna
our
say,
problem. No, I mean that's where I was going, right? I think
Yeah.
for all of our sakes, I think we just need a tournament where the Big Ten we have a couple Elite Eight teams and a team wins it all, right? I mean, it's been way too long. What was it, Michigan State, the last team? It's
Yeah,
just
yeah. For as much as
2000 or something like that.
as much as people pick on Purdue because they're the latest top dog in the conference for not having tournament success, it's been 23 years since a Big Ten team's won the tournament.
Yep.
It's been 4 or 5 years since a Big Ten team even made the Final Four. Like there's been, I think, 10 or 11 different conferences put a team in the Final Four since the last time the Big Ten did it. So
you can pick on us for us. We were you guys 2 years ago, if you guys are 3 years ago now. You remember Io Kofi, the 1 seed, and I'm going to say it, the Javamen aren't going to be happy with me because we don't try to say the word on our podcast, but the Loyola game. The Loyola game was 2 hours.
Was it Sister Mary or who was
Sister
it?
Jean.
Sister
So
Jean,
no
yeah.
joke. So my second girl was born about 6 months before that. So after that, I don't know if you guys remember that game, 11 a.m. game. Sister Jean had me on my knees, then I had to go baptize my daughter right after the game.
Wow.
A dagger.
That's
So
a
I'm
dagger.
with you. We need someone to step up. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, I was gonna looking at this Purdue Gonzaga game. I was gonna ask you, Russ. I had planned coming in here and saying, "Man, what do you do about Fletcher Lawyer? Right? 0 for 6, 0 for 3. Like, man, Colvin is playing really well. Do you think there's a possibility?" And then I just pulled up this Tennessee box score, and he's got 20 points.
Yeah, it's a good thing
a
the
stud.
Tennessee game started an hour before we came on here because he came out lights out. Like
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be having a bad take, and everybody would be in the comments telling me, I need to adjust that. But yeah, so no, Purdue's looking really good, and they look good against Tennessee right now, better than they did in the first half. But we'll see where it goes from here. But yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that Purdue, at least in the Big Ten, is the favorite still, and there's nobody
They're
really
the chalk.
challenging them. So. All right, let's move on to our next game. Our next game, we have Illinois and Marquette. So Illinois falls to Marquette. I don't know if I really blame Illinois in this one. Tyler, Kolick, just kind of came alive and really just did whatever he had to do. If I had to be critical on anybody, it would probably be Coleman Hawkins, maybe a little bit on Brad Underwood with how he didn't play Dane Danger that much. So I don't know. What were your thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit it on the head there, JB. I think that there's a couple things. First off, I like that we're playing Marquette Game 3. Kind of to your point, Russ. I don't like the cupcake schedule, so I love facing the best to see what we're made of. Coleman Hawkins is a player that basically
Scott's not happy with you.
Yeah, of course. I knew he would not like that one.
All right, sorry.
Speaking of Java Scott, he was the one who put. So what we like to do is we do captain of the ship, walk the plank, and Coleman Hawkins was on the plank. If you listen to the last Javamen podcast episode, so I firmly believe that the Illinois season rides on the shoulders of Coleman Hawkins, because if you watch that game, the first 20 minutes, Hawkins was atrocious, and just. I think actually he came out now. He hasn't played the last 2 games, so I think he was hurt a little bit. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He kind of seems, the last couple years, he's a player that gets better throughout the year. So there was a 10-minute stretch in the second half where we ended up taking the lead by 3, and it was because of Coleman had about 4 straight plays that were off the charts. And then after that, it kind of faded back to, it's just the consistency with him. Mm-hmm. And then Brad, right? I mean, we always talk about the X's and O's with Brad, and it just seems like the other coaches just always seems one step ahead of him. Unfortunately, Brad, we like to say Brad's a great, maybe even elite program builder, but he might not be the guy that you want the last 10 minutes when you're drawing up a play. You're right though. It was the Tyler Kolick show. He showed why he was a first-team All-American. He was playing on one ankle. He dominated everybody on the court. He was getting to the hoop at will. Terrence Shannon played good. He's by far our best player. The guy's electric. He can shoot. He can get to the hole. But it goes back to we couldn't stop Kolick from getting to the hole, and every time TSJ tried to go left, they were playing like a matchup zone. They switched it up on D. and it just seemed like he couldn't get to the hole, and we were settling for threes. If you looked at points in the paint, we lost that battle by about 20. So for us, it's going to come down to point guard play. We don't have a point guard. It's going to be tough. We got to try to find somebody. We have Nicolo Moretti from Italy. He played really well the last game. He got hurt at the end of the game, but he showed some flashes of maybe being our point guard. Right now, we're playing Ty Rodgers at point, he's really like a small forward type. He can't shoot, but the guy's all hustle. He'll out rebound you. He'll box you out all day. The guy's got heart. But with this team, it comes down to 3-point shooting, free throw shooting, and turnovers. And it's kind of been the story the last 3 years. Russ, I don't know if you caught any of that game or if you have any observations from afar on the Illini. I'm curious to hear.
So I did some box score research on the game. I didn't actually watch the game. But the thing that stood out to me on that was, like you said, you guys had tied it. You actually think you took like a 52-50 lead, and then Marquette tied it back up at 52 all, and that was with about 11 minutes left. And then the last 11 minutes, you guys made 2 shots. Yeah, the last 11 minutes, and both were 3-pointers. So you just said 3-pointers. That's it was I think 6 Terrence Shannon free throws, and he had a 3, and then I just had it. You had another guy hit a 3, but so Terrence Shannon scored 9 of your last 12 points. But it's you talked about Purdue and Illinois. I guess we're just going to keep comparing them. Yeah. It did remind me of some of the years that Purdue, we had a talented team, but our big issue might have been not having a point guard. And that can lead to some cold stretches where you go, 8, 10, 12 minutes only making a basket or two. And you can't do that in the Big Ten, and you definitely can't do that in today's college basketball when you're playing a top 5 team. Illinois has got the talent. They've got the talent to compete and beat anybody on any given night. But like you said, Nick, it's the consistency. You've got to have the consistency to sit there and not, have those cold stretches. You've got to have a coach that can draw up an X and O play when you're in the middle of a 3 or 4 minute stretch where you need a bucket to stop the bleeding. You've got to be able to do that. And it looked like Illinois just struggled with that the last, 10, 11 minutes of that game. And when you don't, you go to the last 12 minutes of game hitting 2 shots, it's going to be hard to beat anybody, let alone a top 5 team in the country. Yeah,
you're spot on. I mean, you can't, it just seems too often it comes down to the last 10 minutes and you have 10 seconds on the shot clock and it's Shannon trying to create. And it's just, you can't have that every play. You got to have some offense that you could go to consistently that gets you an easy bucket, and that's where I think the Illini will struggle down the stretch.
Well, it's hard to run an offense if you don't have a true point guard or a true center, right? I mean, Coleman Hawkins, and I said at the beginning of the year, I think he has the talent to be, and the size and everything to be the spectacular player. He just severely lacks the consistency to do so. Terrence Shannon Jr. struggled with consistency some too, but not near to the level that Coleman Hawkins has. And I don't know how Brad Underwood can put an offense together. I mean, this isn't the NBA. In the NBA, you can kind of go with or without a point guard and without a center, that kind of stuff. But in college basketball, I just don't know how you're able to put something like that together.
And real quick before we move on, because I want to, you had mentioned this and it was a great point, JB, of Dane Danger played 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And for some reason, Brad chose to play Amani Hansberry over. Hansberry is a top recruit. I think he was top 100 center, plays same position as Dane, right? But he opted to go Hansberry, who only played 6 minutes, right? But Hansberry came off the bench before Dane, which was a surprise to everybody, especially in that game. I don't understand the logic there of bringing your freshman against third game of the season against Marquette, who's ranked 4th in the country, where Dane's essentially, he's a redshirt junior at this point. And it just, to me, doesn't make sense. Maybe in game 20 when you figure out what Hansberry is, but to go straight to Hansberry over Dane, they flashed to Dane on the bench. He wasn't thrilled. Dane got a lot of PT against some cupcake schools the last 2 games. But problem with Dane, I'll just throw it out there real quick, and then we could move on from the Illini. But Dane is, I think, 1 of 11 from the free throw strike this year. That's not going to get it done. You can't play him. You just can't play him.
Yeah, I mean, it's a severe liability, and with the way teams are playing now with so many players, especially early on in the season, you can afford to take those fouls and make that stuff happen. So, Sonny from the Illini cast, who covers football for Illini or the Illinois, he said Illinois being dropped out of the top 25 because of a loss to number 4 Marquette was ridiculous. I completely
point.
agree.
Great
I
point by Sonny.
completely agree with that stuff. Why in the world are you dropping a team more than 2 spots when they lose to a team that's 20 spots ahead of where the other team is? Especially
we're penalizing. We're penalizing for playing a strong schedule. It makes no
right,
sense.
exactly. You're going to give it to some team that didn't even beat anybody. So
that's why I
All
would
right.
look at Ken Palm. That's it. Just worry about Ken Palm.
Yeah.
Ken Palm.
Yeah.
And
AP poll
Right.
just measures winning streaks. That's all it measures.
Well, that's all just opinions. So stupid voters. All right, Wisconsin making the Big Ten proud, 65 to 41 against Virginia. They bounced back. Wisconsin had a tough game against Tennessee not too long ago. I don't know. I shouldn't say I don't know. I don't think that people had super high expectations for Wisconsin after that. Not that they played bad, but they were just kind of like, oh, okay, maybe this team has taken a step back. But, 24-point win over Virginia, that's a good win for them. So, Nick, what were some of your thoughts on this game?
I was surprised. Not gonna lie, I did not expect to see Wisconsin dominate the way they did. Virginia, I think we all know, they're notorious for having a strong D. It was a very, I think, good matchup, right? Like Wisconsin's very similar. They always play tough D. Probably not the most exciting game to watch. Wisconsin struggled against the Illini the last couple of years. The Badgers and Juwan, just for your Michigan fans out there, Juwan Howard's still winless against Brandon Underwood. I'll put that out there for you guys. But yeah, I was surprised. I think it's good for the Big Ten. I want Wisconsin to be as ranked as high as possible for when we play them.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I was surprised, and I thought Stephen Crowell played really well.
Crowell's solid.
Yeah. And he dealt with some injuries last year and stuff, and that really limited him to what he could really be. So it's nice to see him out there playing more to his potential and who he truly is. Russ, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, like you all said, especially Nick, 24-point win over a team like Virginia is really like a 40-point win over anybody else. It's unheard of because Virginia plays so slow. It's so painful to watch. Yep. Like when you look at it, you're like, is that right? There's got to be a typo. There's no way they beat them by 24 points. But I mean, Wisconsin's, it's similar to Illinois. I would put them maybe a tier or two below Illinois, but they're very talented. They could compete with and maybe beat anybody on a given night. We've looked at some of those lists. We talked about the guard list a few weeks back, and you look at the bigs too. They've got with Crowell and Wall, they've got a couple of the best bigs in the Big Ten. With Hepburn and Esigian's obviously still battling, doing whatever he's doing with his injury, but their leading scorer is AJ Starr. A guy that maybe people didn't expect to make that big of a jump as what he has made, but they've got the talent. But they're already up and down, right? They've already lost to Tennessee. They lost at Providence, but then they go beat Virginia. So, can they get some consistency? That might be the key word tonight for some of these teams that we're going to talk about in the Big Ten is, you got to be consistent. The Big Ten has got talent. They've got talent. They can compete with darn near anybody on a given night, but, you've got to string together wins to get a good seed in the tournament and to get in the spot to make a big run and to, get some, honor back in the Big Ten name on the national stage. So
yeah, I'm glad you brought up Storr. That was a name I was going to bring up as well, Russ. Yes, he's the leading scorer on the team right now. For him, I love his energy. I love how active he is off the ball. I love how active he is on defense. He reminds me of the guy you play at with the YMCA that isn't very good, but he just runs more than everybody else. So eventually he gets open because everybody else is tired of guarding him.
Like a true Aaron Kraft fan right there. Yeah.
But I mean, listen, that's kind of what this Wisconsin team needs a little bit on offense sometimes. Sometimes they get a little stagnant. I don't know if, grade guard, what he's doing sometimes with this offense. I really question it. I know Wisconsin fans have as well, but when you have somebody who has that energy and who has that movement, it gets everything else moving as well because guys like, oh, this guy's I better get moving too. And I think it's something they missed last year, a player like that to be able to help them. So it's good to see him out there, and I think he played played well in this one. Only played 21 minutes, but in those 21 minutes, he was effective. So, any more thoughts on that one before we move on, guys?
No, they got a good core. They're going to be tough.
Yep, they are. All right, we're going to talk about Russ's second favorite team, Indiana.
Louisville.
Yeah, right. So Indiana beat Louisville. They also lost to UConn on Sunday, so we can talk about that if we want to, if you guys have any notes from that. But, I figured we'll talk more about the most recent game, and also IU won it, so, probably nicer to the IU fans to do that. But yeah, Indiana, I've been watching Indiana quite a bit. My in-laws have season tickets, so I've gone to a few Indiana games this year. They're a very interesting team. I don't know if they've really shaken much of what people had to say about them before the year began. But Russ, I'm curious what your thoughts are.
So did you all see or hear Mike Woodson's post-game comments?
I missed
After UConn?
After Louisville.
Oh, no, I didn't hear after Louisville.
Those that didn't catch the game, they were actually down to Louisville by I think it was 2 points or 4 points with just a little over 4 minutes to go in that game.
Yeah.
And they switched up to a zone. And the zone basically got them back in the game and won them the game. You see it? Nick?
I heard. Yeah. No, keep going, though. Keep going.
So after the game, Mike Woodson got interviewed by Don Fisher on the IU radio. And he said, it was the zone that's got us back. I've never been a big zone guy. They just mentioned it in the huddle. I said, why not? We hadn't practiced it a whole lot. So it's a team that literally he just was like, let's throw something at the wall and hope it sticks. And if I'm an IU fan, that worries me a little bit. But at the same time, it's like, hey, at least they're letting them kind of go play. But, being in the Louisville area as I am, I'm familiar with the Louisville basketball program, and it's not in a great place. So Louisville's probably one of the worst Power 5 conference teams right now. So to barely beat them at the end of the game on a Hail Mary of, hey, let's just try the zone and see how it works, I'd be worried. I feel like we're going down the ladder of talented teams that aren't performing where they should. We started up at Illinois as a top 25 team. Wisconsin's kind of on the outside looking in. And in Indiana, they always get those 4-star, those 5-star guys that are supposed to save their program. And it doesn't seem to pan out.
Russ, I saw the other, this might have been satire, but I thought I saw a tweet that the Cardinals coach said after the game that he was tricked by the zone, and that's why they lost. Was that a joke? Was that satire, or was that for real?
That's for real. They're not too
that sounds
thrilled
like
with,
something would happen to Brad.
They're not too thrilled with Kenny Payne. Now, it does make sense a little bit if you think about it, because Mike Woodson actually admitted
Scott
they don't play the zone much. They don't play the zone. So it's like you wouldn't study it, you wouldn't game plan for it. So yeah, it's like what the heck? They don't do this at all. Why are they playing this defense at the end of the game? So but yeah,
that's awesome.
I don't know if Kenny Payne makes it to the season for Louisville.
How long has he been the coach over there?
This is only his second year. So last year they won 2 games? I forget what their actual record was, but they lost to teams like Bellarmine.
That's unbelievable.
They're one of their exhibition games they lost to. It wasn't Kentucky Christian, but it was Kentucky Wesleyan that they lost to in an exhibition game.
Can't be losing to Kentucky religious schools.
Oh man,
not good for the brand.
No.
But sorry, I cut you off there, Russ. What were you saying?
Oh no, you're good. You're good. That's enough Louisville talk anyway. So
it doesn't really surprise me that Mike Woodson did that, just because he is an NBA guy. That's where he's kind of known for being and stuff like that. And so naturally he's going to bring in more NBA, type of players, but that also can be difficult because the NBA type of players don't always have the, drive that maybe the college players do. Like Tyler Kolek, he's one of those guys that he is a great college player because he has the drive. He might do some good things in the NBA someday, but that, I think it's pretty clear that's not what he's built for, like some of these other players are. And that's kind of what you have with Mike Woodson a little bit, is you have some really talented players. Khalil Ware is probably going to be in the NBA someday. He's going to do a good job. He has the size for it. He has the athleticism. He's starting to get out and get a better jumper. I think he hit 2 threes in this game against Louisville or something like that. So, it's huge for him, but Mike Woodson, he doesn't coach like a college coach. And sometimes I think that's a good thing, and then other times I'm not sure if it's the best thing. But I definitely think he's better than what the Miller guy and Tom Crean were. So I feel like this Indiana program is at least better in that way. So, all right, got a couple comments here. Illinois better watch out on Friday. The Knicks are coming.
Playing Western Illinois.
Second Java Nick.
That's my buddy right there. I went to Western. Shout
There we
out to Jay Chi-Town C.
There we go. Thanks for joining us, Jay. All right, before we move on, I got to do the ad read. So college basketball analytics, CPB analytics, we get a free subscription for them. In exchange for that, we do a promo for them every basketball podcast. So they have a lot of good analytics over there. I like the game recaps the best. If I ever miss a game, I feel like I watch the game by looking at the game recaps. They're really helpful. A lot of in-depth stats. I kind of say they're like the PFF of college basketball. So if you ever think about you want numbers for basketball, like what you get for football or something like that, go check out CPB Analytics. All right, our next game, Iowa played Creighton. So this was actually an interesting one. Kind of some criticism, but at the same time, Iowa also swept the men's basketball weekly accolades this week, even though they lost to Creighton here. So it was an interesting one, but I don't know if this Iowa team is anything much different than what they typically are, right? I mean, a lot of offense, not a lot of defense. They're playing a lot of freshmen, but kind of seems to be the same thing all the time. Nick, going into this game, or talking about this game, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually was unable to watch this game, but I was not surprised to see the final score. I always like to circle Iowa on the Illini schedule. That's a get-right game for the Illini offense. Seems to be the only team that we can consistently put 90 on year in and year out, and I love the fan reaction. So I'm not surprised. I think it's going to be a lot of that for Iowa. I see them probably hovering, 8 to 10 wins in the Big Ten and a lot of 90 to 80 games.
Yeah, it's kind of a product of very little offense, or not very little defense being played and really having so much offense. And I feel like that kind of goes into the Big Ten awards too, when you score a lot of points and have those things that impacts it. Russ, you get eyes on this game. You have any thoughts?
My thoughts are just when you get through the football season and the nepotism in the Iowa football program, you're reminded that it happens in basketball too, because his son plays. You think it's bad that the brothers are coaching together? It's now you get to see McCaffrey coach and McCaffrey run around the court trying to make plays. But no, I agree. We talked about a couple weeks back again what the Big Ten is going to look like. Is the top going to separate? It's not looking like it's going to. It's looking like you're going to have a lot of those teams, like Nick said, hovering around the 8 to 10 to 12 win mark, and every game in the Big Ten season could be a difference between being a 9 seed or being a 2 seed in the Big Ten tournament.
Yep.
Because Iowa's another team that they've got the talent, but can they be consistent? Can they do it night in, night out?
Yeah, I mean, can they play defense is really what it comes down to. They have the offense. They're high-powered enough. They can make things happen. Their freshmen are doing a good job. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing for me is just I don't know where the leadership is on this Iowa team. I don't know where it comes from. I know they have Patrick McCaffrey. Maybe he's there. Tony Perkins, I know, has been there a while, so maybe he's doing something like that. But, I mean, I don't see like a fiery leader on the court like a lot of these really good teams have. I see it with Purdue. I see it with even Indiana with Xavier Johnson. Like I see him be that fiery leader for them. I see it with Ohio State. I see it with Illinois, where somebody steps up and they're this leader that's trying to get everybody and galvanize them together. I don't know if I see that on Iowa, and I feel like that's gonna impact them.
That's because Fran brings all the fire. He brings all the fire and passion. Everybody else is too afraid to even come close to that. So
they don't want to challenge his fire.
JR, who are the Hawkeyes? Who would you say their best player is? Is Samford up there? I like that Samford.
So Samford's like their best scorer. I don't know if I would consider him their best player, just because he doesn't really do anything on defense. If I had to choose a best player, I'd hate to say it, but I'd probably pick Patrick McCaffrey, maybe.
Yeah.
That's who I would probably say.
So Tony Perkins lit up the Illini last year, but he was also
Ohio State too.
Yeah, but Iowa also ran the same play every play down the court in the second half, and Brad played the same defense. So take that for what it is.
You mean his players didn't come in and suggest they switch to his own?
I was actually thinking, Russ. I mean, I would love that if somebody is like, Brad, how about we try a zone here? I wouldn't hate it.
An Iowa player gets into the huddle with Fran. Fran, what if we play some more defense? No, we can't do that, guys. Switch up our defense.
Fran's hilarious, though. I like Fran.
I still remember, I think it was last year when he had the stare down with the ref. Did you guys see that?
That was unbelievable.
Which one? I feel like he did that every other game.
I think it was a tournament game. It was either Big Ten tournament or NCAA tournament where he's just like...
And then they step closer to each other.
The ref was not backing down either.
Yeah,
he was shorter than
Fran.
Fran.
Ref. That was great.
Yeah. Oh, man. All right, let's move on. Our last game. This is going to be kind of a depressing one, but Maryland falls to Villanova, who literally, like, just a week before fell to Penn. Now, granted, it was at Penn, so, that, I guess, makes a difference. But still, I don't think a team should be losing to Penn, and it's kind of embarrassing that Maryland lost to Villanova. I checked in with our Turtleheads guys to see what they were thinking, and they were none too happy about this game or Kevin Willard or anything going on. So, did you guys get eyes on this game and have any thoughts?
JR, can we get a welfare check on Turtlehead Tricky? He cannot be happy with what's going on in College Park right now. I actually caught this game.
Did you?
And I couldn't believe what I was watching because Maryland looked so dysfunctional on offense. And when so as much as I like to say, we beat on Wisconsin and Michigan the last couple of years, that's like Maryland on the flip side for Illinois. Brad cannot beat Maryland. I'm not sure if Brad has beaten Maryland or the last time that's happened. And watching them in that game against Villanova, it's like they all forgot how to play basketball. And if I'm not mistaken, I thought most of their team was returning from last year. I mean, Jameer Young, where was he? What is going on with him? And then who's the I'm blanking on the name. I think he might come off the bench. No, he's a senior now. He's been on the team forever. He might come off the bench now. He can shoot a little bit from the outside. I'm blanking on his name, but
Geronimo?
No, Geronimo's new this year. Lamoth?
No.
I can't remember.
Whatever. This guy, when he was a freshman, he dominated Illinois, and I just don't. He just hasn't improved. I'm surprised to see that. I'll find the name when
Dante Scott's
Dante Scott.
guy.
Dante.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Dante Scott.
He started.
This guy, he starts. Okay. He started as a freshman, and he dominated Illinois as a freshman. And I just don't understand how he's not at least like a second-team Big Ten player. So we'll see. I always regard, Willard is a highly regarded coach in the Big Ten. We did our Big Ten rankings going into the year, and I think I had Willard at 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Where'd you have Chris Holtman?
I think I had him rounding out top 6. I think
Okay.
Holtman's a good coach.
Yeah. Most Ohio State fans, I don't know the basement, so.
Yeah. It's been a rough couple years, but I mean, before then, I thought, he's. Yeah.
I'm just always curious what other people's thoughts are on him because every Ohio State fan is so down on him. But
yeah, I mean, I'm a little biased, right? Chris Collins was at the basement. For me, but that's
no, for sure. I'm glad you brought up Jameer Young. Jameer Young is kind of like the biggest part of all of this going on right now. He has just not played well. It's not played like himself. It almost feels like Jameer Young looks around and he's like, "Oh wow, I have other teammates that I don't have to do everything now." And it's almost like he feels this pressure to like not do everything. When in reality, there are some times where I'm like, Jameer, just like take it. Do what needs to be done in this situation. But it's like he's trying to be this team player that I just don't know that he always has to be. He needs that like killer alpha instinct to go out and make the play that needs to be played. Have you seen that, Russ? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, one of his biggest tools, when I was trying to get Jordan going when he was on here with me, Jameer Young's a volume guy, right? That's my line. He's a volume guy, but in all reality, like he's a volume guy because you'll see his stat line that'll say like 3 for 11, but somehow he scored 22 points. Well, how do you do that? Because he goes to the free throw line 12, 14, 16 times a game. Well, he's only had one game where he's gone to the free throw line more than 4 times.
Yeah. In this game, he went 0.
Exactly. He didn't get to the free throw line at all. And that if he's not doing that, if he's not forcing the action and getting the other team in foul trouble, and then also getting those free buckets at the charity stripe, like, yeah, it's not going to work out. They're going to put up 40 points and not be in a ball game. You know, he can't score 9 points and expect them to be competitive. He's too important to their success and their failure this year to not make it happen. He's got to step up, or this could be a rough year for Maryland.
I will say, I just remembered that they played tonight, so I looked at the box score really fast, and he had 20 against UMBC, and was 9 for 11 from the free throw line. So
volume guy, Russ.
So they're at least the best team in their state, maybe. Okay, so, all right.
Well, all UMBC, right. You know, weren't they the team that upset Virginia?
They were, and they almost beat Louisville. Going back to Louisville, I hate bringing that up again. But, they should have beat Louisville, but they threw it away at the end of the game. But,
What was the final, JR?
92-68. So
all right, so they got a get right game. They needed that.
That was their first game of over 70 points. Wow.
I was a little insulted when the Big Banter rankings came out and Jameer was ahead of, for shooting guard, Jameer was ahead of TSJ.
There were a lot of people insulted by those guard rankings. I do hope that Maryland kind of gets right, because I do feel like there's a lot of talent on this team. I think Jordan Geronimo, I don't know. I kind of hope that he has a resurgence, but it doesn't look like it. I mean, he had more fouls than he had points in this game, and he played for 15 minutes. So it's like, you know, how much production are you really bringing when you're doing that? The freshman DHS, he's not been spectacular so far, but at the same time, it's like, you know, you really want all of your offense to be put on this true freshman? I mean, he's got over 10 points 3 times now, because he had 12 against UMBC, but still, like, you know, only 2 points against Villanova. I don't know. I just think there's some holes in this offense that they need to fix. It's good to see UMBC that they kind of had a bit of a resurgence there, but they're going to have to make it happen against some better teams down the stretch. So, you guys got any more thoughts before we get done with Maryland?
I want to poke the bear a little bit here and see if I can't get you guys going, because I know everybody likes to hate the team at the top and hate the guy at the top. So I know a big narrative, a big storyline last year in the Big Ten was how Zach Edey is officiated. So I would just love to hear your guys' thoughts, especially an Illinois fan, when you talk about Kofi being a similar style player that just gets beat on and beat on and beat on. I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on that.
You can take this first, Nick.
I think I think the refs were a lot more unfair to Kofi than Edey, if I got to be honest with you, Russ. I just, you know, Edey's also bigger than Kofi, like way bigger than Kofi, and Kofi is the biggest player, I think, in Illinois history. Like, he was a monster, and Kofi made him, and Edey made him look small. But I don't know. It's tough. It's tough because you know, Edey bumps someone, they go flying. So it's hard player to officiate. I think more so just the officiating's bad. I mean, we could talk about football officiating as well, just college officiating in general. The Java spy, who was he was doing the chat here, notorious for hating the zebras. They just Illini always seem to be on the wrong side of things. But yeah, I mean, I like to hate on Edey a little bit. I'm not gonna lie to you, Russ.
What about you, JR?
So I don't hate like Edey off the court. Edey's one of those guys that like I feel like off the court and everything, like he seems like he's really, really good, and like his story and everything like that. So it's kind of hard for me to hate him on the court because I let my heart get into it too much, where I'm like, oh well, personally I don't think I hate this guy, but Edey's the guy that I don't like. I'll be honest and say he's really good. But at the same time, I'm also going to be honest and say that I think he gets away with stuff that other guys don't get away with. I mean, I've seen Zed Key, who is way smaller than Zach Edey, do things to guys, and he gets called for it. And then I see Zach Edey do it to Zed Key, kind of going back to that injury last year, and he doesn't get called for it. And so I am a bit understanding, because I get that it's like it's really hard to officiate somebody who's 7'4" and everybody else is like under 7 foot. I mean, you know, imagine me playing in like a 5th grade basketball game. You know, how how would they officiate that? So I don't know if I necessarily blame him for it. It does frustrate me. off like not watching a game, I don't get as frustrated about it, but definitely like last year when Zed Key got hurt when he was playing against Zach Edey, that did really, really frustrate me. But again, I can't really say it's like Zach Edey's fault. He's just playing his game, and the refs are going to be what the refs are. So.
Russ, there was an Illini Purdue game. It was when Kofi. It was last year of Kofi, so I think Edey was a sophomore. It was a holiday, so it was like an 11 a.m. or noon game. I don't know if you remember that game. It was in Champaign, and it went into overtime. Unbelievable game. But I'm tainted because in that game, Edey elbowed. I think it was one where he had the ball, brought it above his head, elbowed Kofi right in the head, right in the face, and there was no foul call. And Kofi literally had to take a seat because he was what seemed like he was concussed. So I'm a little scarred from that. But I'm sure you feel completely on the other side of the scale, because that's how we all felt with Kofi, where he's just getting absolutely mauled every play.
So one thing that's been interesting with him this year is last year he kind of obviously the team as a whole burst on the scene, right? Purdue was not ranked coming into the season. Edey was coming into his junior year, but he didn't average more than like 18 or 19 minutes a game because we'd always had the two bigs that we kind of rotated. So last year was the first year that he actually got to play 30, 35 minutes a game. And this year you're already hearing from guys, especially like Jay Billis and those types, that my challenge to you as a basketball fan would be just watch Zach Edey when you play, watch Purdue play, and just watch him go up and down the court a few times. Because one thing I've heard a lot this year already is you could call a foul against Zach Edey on like every play.
Yeah.
But at the same time on offense, or when he's playing defense, it's like everything he does is going to throw somebody off because he's just a giant dude. But the guy, especially the second half of the season last year, once he started getting the National Player of the Year narrative going, you'd see him in post-game pressers, and he's got cuts, and he's bleeding, and he's bruised up. Because if you watch dudes playing on the post, he's just getting beat and beat and beat. And one strategy that has challenged Purdue is kind of the unspoken strategy in college basketball, which is they can't call every foul, right? Like no coach is going to come out and say, that's our game plan, is we're going to just beat the crap out of Edey because they're not going to play every single foul. Yeah. But they'll say, hey, we're going to take the physical fight to them. We're just going to play physical. But then they'll complain about, Edey fouled out 2 or 3 guys. But like, I think that's the strategy that people play against Purdue, is just beat the crap out of them, knowing that they're not going to call everything. And then Edey is so big that, he grabs the ball and he turns and he's hitting somebody with his elbow. So it's hard. Like I'm watching the Tennessee game tonight and we're struggling because Edey can't – I didn't see the minutes, but Edey can't have played more than 15 minutes tonight because he literally – every time he goes up for a rebound, they call a foul and he's sitting back down. The last – I think his 4th foul he picked up with like 10 minutes left in the game tonight. They showed a replay and he's literally standing in the spot, reaches straight up to grab the ball, and they called a foul on him, and it's his 4th foul. So it's like, what is he supposed to do? So –
real quick, Russ. So spot on with how it was with Kofi. I think even the ref told Brad during one game that we would have to call a foul on every play, and Brad's like, "Yeah, if it's a foul, call a foul on every play." Like that's how you have to.
Painter said the same thing. Almost
it's ridiculous that like they say we can't call. I mean, if it's a foul, it's a foul, right? Like you can't just say we're not going to call it because we can't call it every time. So I can empathize with you for sure. It's tough, but Edey is super impressive. The way the guy can shoot free throws, that was the one thing he could do that Kofi could not. I mean, that's a game changer. It's a game changer. Kofi was always like 50 to 55%, and it was. I mean, that lost us a lot of games.
Edey was around 70% last year, so that was a big part of him being the player of the year.
Yeah.
No, I do sympathize with Edey, a bit, because I do get it. Like I was saying, if I played against 5th graders for an entire game, probably look like I was fouling them the entire game too. But Nick's exactly right. It's the unfortunate fact of what officiating has basically become in college athletics. I mean, these guys aren't full time. Yeah. And every now and then, like I think there was a story last year, like one ref he refereed like 6 games in 7 days or something like that because they want the best refs every single time because the terrible refs suck. And like they interviewed him about it, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that's not uncommon at all." He was like, "I could referee 28 games in a month."
Well, and part of the problem in college basketball too is these officials will be all over the country. So they'll
Yeah.
call 6 games in 7 days, but they'll call a game at UCLA and then go call a game at Baylor and then go
Yeah.
call a game at UConn.
So they're
and then
hopping
go.
on a flight right after the
Yeah.
game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Any more thoughts before we get out of here, guys?
Nothing for me, JR.
All right.
Thanks for
Hey,
having me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks for
thanks
coming
for-
on, guys. You guys are welcome
thanks for
back
having me.
anytime. Just sign up on the sheet. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Appreciate you. Have a great night.
Thanks, guys.
Peace.